Welcome to the Truth in the Turn podcast. I'm your host, Zach Arnold, alongside Austin Leak, and our podcast dives into the truth in NASCAR to break some of the narratives within the sport. Today, we're talking to Peter Stratta, a passionate journalist who paved his way into the NASCAR media scene.
Make sure you guys give us a follow on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Truth in the Turn.
What's up?
Hey, Peter, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. How's your day?
So far so good.
Yeah, so can you introduce yourself to the podcast and just tell us about what made you a NASCAR fan?
Sure, my name is Peter Stratta. I'm a NASCAR reporter for TSJ Sports and also a content creator on YouTube. And this is actually a funny story. My NASCAR fandom dates to seeing the movie Cars in theaters. I was probably 8 years old when that movie came out, and it was actually the first movie I went back and saw in theaters multiple times. I loved it so much, and I quickly found out that it was based on real life, and the rest has been history. I've been a diehard fan basically ever since.
Yeah, so one of our episodes was about the movie Cars. This one's more about NASCAR media and how that impacts fans. So can you just describe how you became a NASCAR journalist and media member?
That's also an interesting story that I feel like I'm pretty unique in telling across other NASCAR reporters. I answered a Twitter DM in high school saying, hey, do you want to write for this website covering NASCAR as a journalist? I said, heck yes, I definitely want to. And then for a couple years there, I was just a worker for the site, one of several people writing for all sorts of sports. And then the people who owned the site, once COVID hit and all sports stopped, wanted to get out, but myself and my colleague Noah Lewis didn't want to get out. So we approached the owners of the website with a proposition of buying the site and continuing it as a NASCAR only publication. He agreed to it. He sold everything to us, and we've been co-running the site ever since as a strictly NASCAR media source.
So over the last 5 years, how do you like it? How's it been?
It's been pretty nice. It's adding YouTube into that element of reporting and just video journalism has been a nice change as well. It keeps both of us very busy doing dual content creation over the weekend, but it always keeps us on our toes. There's never a dull moment at the racetrack that can't be filmed or documented.
So can you describe what a normal weekend at the racetrack is like for you?
Well, yeah, I was just at the racetrack this past weekend. I'm not sure when this will be posted, but we just had the Bristol race weekend in Tennessee for Truck Xfinity and the Cup Series. And on Saturday, I woke up here at my home in North Carolina at 5:30 in the morning, drove 3 hours to get to Bristol by 10 when press conferences started. There were a few press conferences, then more drivers came in for their media availabilities, the scrum style interview opportunities, and then it was a full day at the racetrack, practice, qualifying, then the race. I think it started at like 5 on Saturday. That was a 300-lap race for Xfinity. That got over. We stayed through the post-race media press conferences and then back and at it for Sunday's race. And we got home back here to North Carolina around 11:15 Sunday night.
Okay, and how do you think social media and online writing helps NASCAR earn more fans or find more fans?
That's a great question, and truly the reach is limitless with social media. So many young people can be reached through social media, not just young people, but old people as well. Truly, about everyone I talk to has some form of, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, some sort of online presence, and the reach that, whether it's a video, a tweet, or Facebook post, whatever, can get versus solely a written piece of content is truly far greater and limitless. It can reach tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of more people.
So speaking of that, do you have a specific post or tweet that you just know has been the best or reached the most people over the time you've been a journalist?
That would probably have to be when he wasn't president at the time, but when former President Trump visited a race last year, the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte, and I was able to get pretty close to him, get maybe 10 minutes or so worth of footage, and with it being Trump and it being Memorial Day, that blew up like crazy, and I think it's still my most viewed video by far.
How many views did it hit?
I think it hit about 500,000 views, and it's still getting views today.
That's awesome. Okay, so do you think having presence at the racetrack is it good or bad for reaching new fans?
I think it definitely reaches new fans, whether you have people who like or loathe whoever's in office. It definitely brings more attention to the racetrack because you have the whole White House press corps there visiting as well, covering, documenting the race. And we saw this just a couple days ago with the recent NASCAR champions honored at the White House. But obviously, with today's political climate, whoever's in power is controversial. So you're bound to have half the fans probably not see that in a positive light. But I do think it elevates the sport and just brings a new level of seriousness by having the commander-in-chief, the sitting most powerful person in the nation, in the world, at your sporting event.
Yeah.
A little bit of a transition here. In the last 5 years, have you noticed any major difference in your job at the track, and how has it impacted fans online, you think?
I think the major difference I've seen over the last 5 years has definitely been adopting video, adopting YouTube into this as well, and it really gives me two jobs at once because I'm not thinking just as a print journalist, I'm thinking as a video journalist as well, trying to document things really in two mediums and trying to get as much content as possible up over any race weekend.
Is there a specific thing you enjoy doing more now, is like writing or just video?
I tend to really enjoy both. I was always an avid writer all through school. I liked writing from a young age, so I like that I'm still able to do that. But video is fun for me too. It's my day job as well as a assignment editor at a local TV news station. So really, I get to balance the best of both worlds with two of my passions.
So,
What do you think content creators and journalists of NASCAR could do to reach new people that might not be fans of NASCAR?
I think it's jump full bore into any new, whether that's a social media platform or just new form of content creation. I know that there's been controversy with all sorts of different sports over adopting, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, whatever video-based social media service. And I don't think there's a wrong answer necessarily on what could blow up or what could bring more eyeballs, more fans to the sport.
And in your time covering NASCAR, have you had a moment that you were there at the track that was very well known?
Yes, that would definitely have to be the 2020 Daytona 500 when Ryan Newman wrecked coming to the finish line and was sent airborne and then landed on his roof and was hit by another car. And for a solid 2 hours, we didn't know if he made it out of that crash, but it was not until probably 11 or 12 that night when we were all still huddled in the media center and heard that he was in the hospital, awake and alert with no life-threatening injuries.
okay, so now this makes me think about the Chastain Hail Melon from 2022.
Yeah,
How do you think that helped NASCAR reach new fans?
it definitely was viral for a couple days there, but I think that's more a short-term thing that blew up maybe on TikTok and YouTube, but for the long term, I don't know how much that really did for the sport. It was definitely a highlight reel moment for that year and that moment, and I'll maybe sell a couple more tickets to Martinsville the next year, but in terms of long-term viability, I don't know if that really moved the needle a ton.
Okay, what about the Brandon Brown Talladega win?
That was also a mainstream moment that probably put NASCAR in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, going back to what I said about political divisiveness and half the fans being mad at whatever politician. I think that really that ruined Brandon Brown's career, and unfortunately, if he were to ever make a racing comeback, he would always be stigmatized with that meme, that moment that he had no part in creating.
Yeah. So thank you for joining our podcast today. I really appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, of course. Glad to help.
Thank you. And what's the next track you're going to be at?
Next one is Rockingham this weekend. We'll be there Friday and Saturday.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good time there. Thank you once again.
Appreciate it.
Well, that was a very insightful interview we had from Peter. Austin, what is your main takeaway from something that you've seen on social media about NASCAR, or something that came from the media center that really stuck with you?
I go a little bit to what Peter was talking about with the whole Ryan Newman crash in 2020. That was a really scary crash. It makes you realize how dangerous NASCAR still is, for that contact to send him flying into the fence and not knowing if he was alive or not. being transported. Those moments in NASCAR are obviously pivotal, like, for fans that don't watch, because it makes it on like ESPN posts that maybe wouldn't be on NASCAR typically. But I thought that was interesting. Also with the Chastain thing, I feel like that was huge for NASCAR. That really got like everybody's like, oh, look, video game move. But Zach, I'm curious about you and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, well, speaking of the Ryan Newman incident, I was at that race and I didn't really see the crash. I was sitting up in the exit of turn 4. You couldn't really see it, but then all of a sudden you see these flames coming everywhere, and the whole crowd goes quiet. And yeah, Denny Hamlin won. That's not the reason the crowd went quiet, but it was just an eerie feeling you got leaving that track because nobody was really saying anything. Everyone was looking at their phones, wondering if Ryan Newman was okay, and thankfully he was. It was an awful story, an awful crash that a lot of NASCAR fans got peace when they saw that photo of him walking up that hospital holding hands with his $2.
So also he mentioned about President Trump and how he was there for that race. He mentioned that as being his biggest viewed thing he posted on social media. I'm just curious what your thoughts are and if you think if the president being at a race is beneficial or maybe negative.
Yeah, I think the president being at a racetrack, it's obviously going to be controversial no matter who you vote for, who you support. Once again, President Trump came to Daytona this year. I was at that race, and I was on pit road during the time. He was also on pit road, and it was just insane. To be able to get in as a journalist, you had to go through Secret Service. You had to, it took like 40 minutes because the lines were so long. But you were still able to get in, and it was just kind of a cool like feeling being at the racetrack with someone as big as the president of the United States there. It's also cool seeing the Air Force One flying in and out. Not many people get to see that. So, yeah, I think the president being at a racetrack it's just going to be controversial. No matter who you support, who you vote for. Say Kamala was there, still going to be very controversial. Yeah, I just always think there's going to be some sort of controversy when someone with that power always shows up to any sporting event in the world. What do you think?
I feel like no matter who the president is, I feel like there has to be, some respect given no matter what political party that you are. I feel like, President Trump being there, although controversial, I also feel like it's good for the sport. I feel like there's a lot of respect there from the drivers. Also, he, met some of them before the race. I feel like that was really cool. I think the only unfortunate part's probably for the fans that are, traveling because, like you said, the Secret Service stuff and, it's probably not the best, but outside of that, I think having a big name like the president at a race is huge for NASCAR, and it'd be cool to see it, the president at other races that maybe aren't as big time, like Daytona, and Charlotte. So we'll see what happens. See if he continues to keep going the races or any of the next upcoming presidents.
Yeah, one other thing from that day that he was at Daytona back in February this year, I remember seeing online something from social media from the racetrack was a bunch of fans were late to the race or late to get into the gates because the Secret Service hold up and they missed the flyover, the pre-race ceremonies, and part of stage 1 of the race due to the president being there. At that point, do you think is it really worth it if the people who paid to get in there can't get in there because of the president in attendance?
Obviously, something has to be different. Like either the president gets there sooner in advance or something, because it's unfair to the fans who really could be the only race they go to that year and they can't even see it. That's terrible. They don't get a refund or anything. And honestly, they might not even want a refund because that might have been the only race they could have went to. People have busy lives and
you can't travel around the world.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate. I really do think that they should maybe try to do something differently next time for the future because we don't want to have that continue happening.
Yeah, and another thing I remember coming from the media center or social media online was a lot of reporters were tweeting out get there early on Sunday just because of all the Secret Service, but also the NASCAR fan base isn't really young. Some usually known to be older than NFL fans or NBA fans, and not many of them might not be on social media, so they might not see that outreach or the warning to get there that early due to the president being there.
How do you reach them? Because social media they sometimes don't use. That's why they have Facebook. Sometimes meets that demographic a little bit more, but they post it on Instagram or Twitter. They might not be on it, like you said, and so how do they reach people? Email.
Could be email.
So, that's something they got to experiment more and see how it works for the future. Thank you guys for joining us for yet another episode. Make sure you guys follow our socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and stay tuned for the next episode on Truth in the Turn.